My sister asked when adopted kids stopped being family until my grandfather's watch answered her. I was adopted when I was 5, which is old enough to remember being chosen and young enough to wonder if people could still change their minds. My grandfather never did. He wasn't soft in the obvious way. He didn't give speeches. He just made room. He saved me the corner slice of cake because I liked extra frosting. He taught me how to fix a bike chain, and every Sunday after dinner, he let me wind his old silver pocket watch. My sister Claire hated that watch. Claire was my parents' biological daughter, and from the day I arrived, she treated me like a guest who had stayed too long. If I got a birthday gift, she called it charity. If Grandpa hugged me, she'd say, "Careful, she'll think she's real family." Everyone heard it. Nobody stopped it. Grandpa would just tap his watch and say, "Family is who shows up on time." I didn't understand that until he got sick. During his last year, I visited him every Tuesday and Thursday after work. I learned which blanket he liked, which soup he pretended to enjoy, and which nurse could make him smile. Near the end, he forgot names sometimes, but he never forgot when I came. He'd look at the clock and whisper, "Right on time." Claire visited twice. At the funeral, she cried louder than anyone. 2 weeks later, we sat around my parents' dining table for the will reading. The lawyer, Mrs. Voss, opened a red folder and calmly read through the usual things. Then she said Grandpa had left me the house. The room went silent. Claire laughed like she had heard a joke wrong. To her, Mrs. Voss repeated my name. Claire pushed back her chair. "That's ridiculous. She's not even his real granddaughter." My mom said, "Claire, stop." But Claire looked straight at me and said, "No, seriously. What time do adopted kids stop pretending they're family? Because apparently it's inheritance time." I went cold. That's the thing about being adopted. People think the wound is not knowing where you came from. Sometimes it's knowing exactly where you are and still waiting for someone to vote you out. Claire said Grandpa was confused. She said I manipulated him. She said I only visited because I wanted the house. I couldn't speak. Then Mrs. Voss placed Grandpa's silver watch on the table. She said, "He asked that this be opened before the recording." My hand shook when I picked it up. I had wound that watch for years, but I'd never opened the back plate. There was a tiny notch near the hinge. I pressed it and it clicked. Inside was an engraving. For Eli, who showed up when love needed proof. Under it was a date. Not my adoption date, not the day he died. It was the night he fell 11 years earlier. When I was 17, my parents were out of town. Claire ignored the hospital call because she had concert tickets. I drove there with a learner's permit and stayed beside him until morning. Claire stared at the watch. Mrs. Voss pressed play on Grandpa's recording. His voice was weak but clear. He said, "If Claire is angry, show her the visitor log. Blood is not a receipt. Love is." Then Mrs. Voss opened one more folder. It was the care home visitor record. Claire's name appeared twice. Mine appeared 73 times. Nobody yelled after that. Somehow silence was worse. Claire sat down slowly, like the chair had disappeared beneath her. I finally said, "I didn't visit him for a house." Mrs. Voss nodded and handed me one last envelope. Inside was a note in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. "You used to ask if the watch would be yours one day." It already was. I was just keeping it warm. I still live in that house. Every Sunday I wind the watch. Not because I need to know the time, because something old in that family finally says I belong.